Okay, so today we're diving into something that's, well, it's everywhere these days. AI, big data, cybersecurity. We hear these terms, but what's the actual connection? And more importantly, why should we care?
You're right, they're not just buzzwords anymore. This is about how our world is actually working right now.
And understanding this isn't just for techies, it's for everyone.
And we're lucky to have some guidance thanks to some research by Helser and Hwang. They've put together this model.
Oh yeah, their work is fascinating. They're really trying to get a handle on how to measure cybersecurity risk. And it's a tough one, right? Because it's not simple at all.
Right, because we're talking about cybersecurity across all these different sectors, everything from self-driving cars to, well, you name it. And that's what makes their research so insightful. They're not just looking at this in a vacuum, they're looking at the big picture.
Yeah.
And one of the things they emphasize is that we can't think of cybersecurity, AI, and big data in isolation anymore. They're all intertwined.
Okay, so give us an example. How does that actually play out?
Well, think about it. The more data we collect, the more powerful AI becomes.
Right.
But that also creates a bigger target for hackers. So it's this double-edged sword.
Okay, so more data equals smarter AI, but also potentially more vulnerable AI. So what are some of the risks we're talking about here? Give us the worst case scenario.
Well, Helser and Hwang don't sugarcoat it. They talk about scenarios where hackers could potentially take control of self-driving cars.
Whoa, okay.
Disrupt traffic systems.
That's scary because those are already on the roads.
Exactly, putting lives at risk. And it's not just self-driving cars. Supply chains are another major area of concern. They've become so reliant on AI and data, which makes them more efficient, but also creates this single point of failure.
Right, so it's like the more connected we are, the more vulnerable we become.
Yeah, exactly. And Helser and Hwang use the word cripple to describe what a cyber attack could do to a major supply chain. Imagine grocery store shelves empty because someone hacks the system that gets food on the shelves.
So this isn't some dystopian future. This is a real possibility.
It is, and that's why understanding how these forces interact is so crucial now. It's not just about protecting our data anymore. It's about protecting our physical safety, our economy, our way of life.
So it's not just about having a strong password. It's bigger than that.
Way bigger. It's about understanding that everything is connected and security is paramount.
So where do we even begin with something this complex? I mean, is there even a way to measure risk when it comes to something as interwoven as cybersecurity, AI, and big data?
That's where Helser and Hwang's model comes in. They've developed this framework for assessing cybersecurity risk across different sectors, and it's surprisingly, well, elegant in its simplicity, I think.
Elegant and simple, huh? Okay, color me intrigued, but I'm also someone who needs to see it to really get it. How do they visualize something as complex as cybersecurity risk?
Picture this, a cube. Kind of like a Rubik's Cube, you know? But instead of colors, each side, it represents a different dimension of risk in cybersecurity.
Okay, I'm picturing this cube. So walk me through it. What are these different sides? What are these dimensions you're talking about?
So, one side, it represents the security goals, confidentiality, integrity, availability. These are like the core principles of cybersecurity, right? Like what we're trying to protect.
Gotcha. So confidentiality, that's keeping data secret. Integrity, that's about making sure it's accurate. And then availability is all about access, making sure it's there when you need it.
Exactly. And each goal, it can be impacted differently. Like say there's a data breach at a hospital, right? Massive confidentiality issue. But then you think about a ransomware attack that shuts down a power grid. That's an availability nightmare.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Different situations, different priorities. So we've got one side of the cube. What about the others?
So another side, it represents the state of the data itself. At rest, in motion, and in processing. Think of it like the where of data vulnerability.
Okay, so data at rest. That would be like information just sitting on a server somewhere. Data in motion. That's data zipping around on the internet. And data in processing, that's when it's actively being used or analyzed.
Got it. And each state has its own weaknesses. Data just sitting there, it might be vulnerable to theft. Data flying around could be intercepted. And data being used, well, it could be manipulated if the system's compromised.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this cube really lays everything out. We've got the what and the where covered. So what's the third side?
This side's all about the security controls we have in place, human factors, technology, and policy. It's the how we protect our data.
So human factors, that's got things like training employees, making them aware. Technology, well, that's our firewalls, encryption software, all that. And policy, there's the rules, the regulations around data.
Bingo. And just like the other dimensions, these controls, they're not foolproof. A company might have top-notch tech security, but if their employees aren't trained well, they could still get tricked by a social engineering attack.
It's like that saying, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got this cybersecurity cube. Confidentiality, integrity, availability, data at rest, in motion, processing, and human factors, technology policy. Like a roadmap for cyber risk.
Oh.
But how do Helser and Hwang actually put this model into action? How do they actually use this to assess risk in the real world?
They take these 3 dimensions and they use them to analyze different sectors, figuring out how vulnerable each sector is and what could happen if a cyber attack hit. So they'll take a real-world example, like a ransomware attack, and then look at how it would impact each of those dimensions we talked about.
Okay, so we've got this cube, this model, to help us wrap our heads around these cyber risks. But how does this actually play out in real life? I mean, they looked at specific sectors, right?
They did, yeah. And it gets really interesting when you start to see how these risks play out differently in different sectors. Take autonomous vehicles, for example. Huge potential, right? Increased safety, less traffic.
Yeah, who wouldn't want to just zone out during their commute?
Right, exactly. But then you put it through the cybersecurity cube. Think about all the data those vehicles collect. Location data, driving habits. If that gets breached, it's a goldmine for identity thieves, even stalkers.
Okay, yeah, not great.
Yeah.
And those cars are constantly transmitting data, right? So they're vulnerable in transit too.
Exactly. And remember what we said about availability. Helser and Hwang actually talk about a case where hackers took control of a Jeep Cherokee, disabled the brakes, transmission, while it was on the highway. Now, imagine that happening to a whole fleet of self-driving cars.
Okay, I'm starting to think maybe I do like driving. So autonomous vehicles, definitely high risk. What other sectors stood out to you?
Well, Industry 4.0, or some are even calling it Industry 5.0 now, it's another big one. We're talking factories, supply chains, all becoming hyper-connected.
Oh, right. The smart factories, where it's all robots and AI calling the shots.
Exactly. And on the one hand, that can be amazing for efficiency, for productivity. But all that interconnectedness also makes them vulnerable. Remember the Colonial Pipeline attack a while back?
Wasn't that a ransomware thing?
It was. Crippled fuel supplies for days. Now imagine that happening to a factory that relies on just-in-time inventory or a power grid. You know, anything that's critical for, well, keeping the lights on. The more efficient things get, the bigger the potential fallout if something goes wrong.
Right, so it's like a trade-off. We gain efficiency, but also increase the risk.
What about all the smart home stuff? It seems like everything's connected these days. My refrigerator's got Wi-Fi now. I mean, come on.
You're telling me. The Internet of Things, it's huge and it's only getting bigger. And yeah, it's convenient. Controlling your thermostat from your phone, getting those personalized recommendations from your watch.
Okay, but I can see where you're going with this. All that convenience, it comes with a price, right? It can. Think about it. All those devices, they're collecting data. A lot of data, and not just any data, personal data.
Yeah.
Where you are, what you're doing, even how well you're sleeping.
Okay, so a breach, that's not just your credit card info, it's everything.
Everything. And it's not always a nefarious hacker either. Sometimes it's companies using our data in ways we don't expect, you know. So it's about being aware.
So it sounds like knowledge is power, right? The more we know about these risks, the better choices we can make.
Exactly. Don't just click accept on every privacy policy you see. Ask questions, do your research, and demand better security practices from the companies you interact with.
It's about being informed citizens in this digital world. So much of the responsibility falls on us then.
It does. But it's not about being scared. It's about being smart. And that's really what Helser and Hwang's work highlights. We need to be having these conversations, thinking critically about the choices we make, and demanding better from the technologies we rely on.
It's not just about staying ahead of the curve. It's about shaping the curve. So the next time you download an app, connect a new device, take a second. Think about your cybersecurity and ask yourself, what information am I giving up? And is it worth it? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been, well, enlightening, to say the least. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe online.